Hey mini dreamers, because that's what I'm calling you. Welcome to my first ever video on my first ever YouTube channel. I'm so excited. Hey there, it's me again. Welcome to my organized chaos, but this is where I work. I'm sure a lot of you have a space like this. I hope I'm not the only one. Anyway, I Dream in Mini is meant to be a place where big dreams come in small packages. Ever since I found out that miniatures were a thing, I've been fascinated. There's some amazing creators out there and miniaturists, and they blow my mind all day long. So for my first ever video, I chose to make butterflies. More specifically, a butterfly collection. The reason is I figured it would be a nice springy theme, since it's spring. And also, I used to have a collection when I was little, so that kind of brings back some good memories. And I figured, hey, what could possibly go wrong? Little disclaimer, I'm definitely not an expert, but I am crafty. I've just started out on my miniature journey, so I'm hoping just to share my creations with you, and hopefully you'll share some back. I also want to give you little tutorials, tips and tricks, behind the scenes peeks of my creative process, and yes, even the occasional, or probably not so occasional, miniature mishap. Anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so here I found some tissue paper that I'm repurposing from a gift that someone received. And what my intention is I'm trying to remove as many wrinkles as I can. So I've got my handy dandy Cricut mini iron, and I'm just trying to iron out as many wrinkles as I can. The reason I'm doing this is because my idea for the butterflies is to use some temporary tattoos that I have and place them onto the tissue paper so that they're more like butterfly wings and they'll be easier to handle. This tissue paper has sparkles in it, so obviously I'll be avoiding the sparkles. And yeah, so that was the first step. So here are the temporary tattoos. You can tell I've had them for a while. I've actually had them for quite a few years. So I just selected a random cutout piece that was already cut out, and I'm going to cut them out into individual butterflies so that they're easier to handle. So here I'm just cutting. This was definitely not the most difficult part. That's coming later, so stay tuned. So once they were all cut, I swiped the rest aside. I kept one and I removed the plastic cover on it. That wasn't always easy, but we got through in the end. So I'm just removing the plastic, and then I grabbed my watercolor pen. So it's just a pen filled with water. You've probably seen them or have some lying around. And that's what I'm going to use to wet the paper and wet the temporary tattoo. I switched over to a different pen because that one looked too mucky. So now I'm just wetting the tissue paper, getting it wet before applying the tattoo, because I think it'll stick better that way. And then once that's done, I press down the tattoo onto the wet part, and that went pretty well. And then I painted the back with more water, and you'll be able to tell as soon as I have enough water on there, the image of the butterfly kind of comes through. You can see the shadow of it. So that's how I know that I've got enough water on there. This part, I have to admit, was very therapeutic. It was very relaxing. That's about the only thing that was relaxing about this project. So I'm just continuing to put all the other butterflies. I'll spare you the footage and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so all of the butterflies have been applied, and now I'm going to carefully remove the paper because I'm worried about if they're going to rip or not. So I'm just carefully peeling it back, and wow, it worked. My plan worked. So I'm pretty happy at this point, and I continue to remove the others. It was definitely easier with the pliers. So I'll spare you that footage again and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I pulled out my handy dandy Ranger heat gun. I really love this thing. It served me well over the years, except for that part later in this video where it betrayed me. Anyway, I was doing this because the butterflies were still a little wet, so I wanted to make sure they were completely dry before cutting them out again. Okay, so here I have cut the tissue paper into a more manageable piece, and now I'm cutting around each butterfly so that I can cut around the contour of each one. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where I started to regret my life choices. This was so finicky. I already decided there's no way I was going to try and cut around those antennae because just no. Anyway, so I carefully and meticulously cut around every single butterfly. Actually, not every single one. I left a few at the end because ain't nobody got time for that. Anyway, so this was a very long process, but I think it was well worth it in the end, as you'll be able to see for yourself later in the video, and hopefully you'll agree. So now that I have one cut out, I'm just going to use my dotting tool to kind of put a fold in the middle so that the wings look like they're up and not just flat. Now I've started working on the base of my frame. So I'm just cutting down a random size of my foam board so it's just easier to work with rather than a whole big sheet because I don't have a big enough work area. And so I've cut a piece down and now I'm going to place the butterflies on it to try and figure out what size I need. So I dumped them out from my little miniature solo cup. I put them in there because I didn't want them to blow away if I sneezed or something. And now I'm just kind of placing them loosely just to get an idea of, like I said, the size that I will need for the background of my frame. Now that I have them loosely placed, I'm just measuring out approximately what size my frame needs to be, and then I'll be able to mark it and cut it out with my X-Acto knife. So I'm putting the butterflies back in. Bye butterflies, see you later. I want to keep them nice and safe, and now I'm just measuring out and marking the foam board so that I can cut it at the right size. So now that I have it cut down to the right size, I'm going to start working on the frame. For the frame, I used wood that I found at Dollarama, so I'm trying to kind of eyeball what size I need. I also want to cut the corners on a 45-degree angle, and you'll see how that goes. Anyway, so I'm just trying to eyeball it, like I said. So I mark it with a pencil, and then I bring out the big guns. Here's my miter box, and my plan is to cut the wood with my miter box and saw. I had to put up the little legs so it would sit properly. And so here I am putting that in. Now I will say this isn't the most exact method because it's on such a small scale and the saw is so big in comparison. It's hard to get a really exact cut, but this is what I chose to do, so this is what we're going to go with. Okay, so now I'm just cleaning up the edge with my X-Acto knife, and I'm not going to lie, this whole frame and getting the angles right did not go very well for me. It is not perfect in the end, but it was good enough because I am not experienced in cutting wood this way. And like I explained, the miter saw probably wasn't the best choice. And also, at the end of it all, I remembered that I have a miter cutter tool that would have made the job probably a lot easier. So yeah, let's just speed up the rest of this process for you, okay? Phew, that was a lot of work. So now I've decided to make the bodies of the butterfly out of some polymer clay that I have. So I just took a little chunk and I'm going to make a little mini snake out of it. And once I have my snake to the size that I want, I'm just going to cut it up with my X-Acto knife into the proper lengths. And once I have that done, I take out my butterflies again and I'm just going to place them so that I can eyeball what length of body I need for the butterflies. So I just place the butterflies on top, which isn't that easy, but I got out my handy dandy tweezers, and once the butterfly was on top, I just kind of cut with my X-Acto knife the approximate length of the body that I needed. Once that was done, I picked it up carefully with my X-Acto knife, or at least I tried to. It wasn't an easy task. And then I gently placed it in the little baking pan that I have. The baking pan comes from an old Easy Bake oven that we do not use anymore, so it is now what I cook my, and by cook I mean bake, and by bake I mean I take my heat gun to it. Because it's so small, I find this works really well, and I don't need a toaster oven taking up space on my table, and so that works really well for me. So once I got done baking the tiny little bodies, I glued each one to the wings using Aleene's tacky glue. I really like this glue. It works well for a lot of applications. So I just picked up the bodies, dipped them in the glue, and placed them on the butterfly wings. Pretty easy. Next, I took an old kid's paintbrush that I had laying around, and I decided that the bristles on the brush would make excellent butterfly antennae. So I proceeded to cut off a few of the bristles on the brush, and I used that to glue on to the butterflies to make the little antennas. This was fairly easy to do. So then I placed them in the frame so I could kind of judge how long the antennas needed to be, and I was able to snip them off at a height that looked good and that would fit in the frame. Okay, so this is where things started to go south a little bit. I realized that I forgot to stain the frame, and I really wanted that stained look, so I decided to take it apart carefully with my X-Acto knife at first to help unstick the glue, because that glue, if this is any kind of testament for Aleene's tacky glue, this would be a really good commercial because it works really well, and I had a really hard time removing the foam board from the frame. So much so that I actually damaged my foam board, and so I basically needed to start all over again. So I cleaned that up, and I was able to stain the frame. So here's my watercolor paint set. I really love this set. It's a travel watercolor set, so it came with the water brush. So I'm just putting on some brown here. This set is really great because you've got a lot of colors and they just kind of swing out. I looked on Amazon to share the link. I couldn't find the exact one, but I found one very, very similar. It just might not have the exact colors, or maybe they do, but not in the same spaces. Anyway, I'll put a link in the description for those who are interested. It works really well, and I find I like using watercolors instead of stain, actual wood stain, because it doesn't smell, it's easy to apply, it gives the same look in my opinion. So yeah, it worked out really great. Okay, so we're back to cutting the foam board again. I took my frame this time and placed it onto the board and just kind of made a mark with my dotting tool to kind of make an indent on where it needed to be cut. And then I took my X-Acto knife and my metal ruler to make sure I could cut a straight line, and I cut out the new back. Then I reached over for my handy dandy Aleene's tacky glue and used that to glue the frame back to the backing, because we know it works well. We've tested that. Once the frame was glued, I removed the excess glue on the inside. I actually removed the glue using my dotting tool and a baby wipe over it. I found that worked really well to get into the corners and remove the glue. And also some of the paint, since it was still wet when I put it on, because I am not a patient person, and so I had to remove some paint that was left from the frame sliding around on the backing. Once that was done, I was finally ready to put my butterflies back into their new home. So I just took my tweezers and placed them as I had had them before. We're getting close. Okay, so somehow I missed some of the footage, but I'll explain what's going on here. I'm using some E6000 glue, and that's going to be used in each corner to glue down a piece of clear plastic that I cut out from what was meant to be a report cover. And so I'm just gluing it down there. I thought by just putting a little bit in each corner, you wouldn't see the glue as much, because I'm afraid that we'll probably see it even when it's dry. So I just tacked it down in each corner with the glue, and that seemed to work out pretty well. I'm happy with it. I'm holding it down a bit to let it adhere. So I just continued to use my fingers to press it down for a while. And I'm just trimming off the excess of the plastic, and I'm also trimming off the excess of the foam board in behind there so that you can't see it from the front, just in case, because it is pretty thick. So at this point, after I'm done fiddling with it, I try and clean it off with some rubbing alcohol, because I can see little specks and it's getting to me. So I grabbed a Q-tip and I dipped it in my rubbing alcohol and started to wipe off any little dust or specks off of the plastic. And then I tried drying it off with the other side of the Q-tip. It still wasn't drying fast enough for me, and I could tell that the condensation was kind of almost like it was in behind. You can't really tell on the video, but it looked wet still to me, but I could definitely see something was off. So I decided, since it wasn't drying fast enough for me, to bring out my handy dandy heat gun. And that's when my heat gun betrayed me. I guess I left it in one spot a little too long, and of course the plastic warped. So now I had to start that part all over again. Oh well, maybe I can use it for another project. So this time I started by putting the E6000 glue onto each corner again, and then I wiped off my plastic before putting it on the frame so that nothing would bother me once it was on there. I just took a Kleenex and wiped it off to get any dust off or anything. And then I just glued the plastic right onto the frame, pushing it into the four corners. And then I grabbed my scissors and just cut off the excess. This was much easier than measuring and cutting it out first like I did the first time. So hopefully I'll learn from my mistakes. And there we have it, finally. I think it looks good, for my first try anyway. The frame could have been better, but I'm very happy with it. Hey there, Megan! Thank you so much for watching my video. And if you think that you've learned something useful that you can apply to your own minis, please let me know in the comments. I really would love to hear from you. Whether you're a seasoned mini maker or just curious to find out what this is all about, there's a place for you here. I welcome you with open arms. I would love to invite you to join the Mini Dreamers community by hitting that subscribe button and ringing that bell so you don't miss any of my mini adventures or my mini mishaps, because there will be some. And remember, big dreams come in small packages. See you in the next video, Mini Dreamers. Bye! Hey there! No, wait. Welcome to my first ever YouTube channel. No. Mini Dreamers. No. And I can't believe that all of the... Hey there, me again. So thank you so much for... I'm not looking at the right guy. Whether you're a seasoned mini maker... What is it? Okay. So you don't miss any of my mini mishaps. I mean, mini... See you in the next video.